The sun rose over the dusty little town of Dusty Creek, painting the wooden storefronts in golden light. Horses snorted, wagons rattled, and children ran excitedly down the dirt road. It was supposed to be a day of joy, the wedding of Clara and Thomas, a union everyone in town was eager to witness. Inside a small wooden church, its bell ringing proudly, Clara stood in front of a mirror. Her dress was simple but pure white, her hands trembling as she tried to calm her nerves. Her eyes held both fear and hope, for this day was meant to change her life forever. The townsfolk filled the pews, fanning themselves in the rising heat, whispering about the perfect young couple. Thomas, tall and proud, stood by the altar. The pastor raised his hands, ready to begin the vows. And then it happened. Thomas's expression darkened, his eyes narrowing as he looked at Clara. His voice, sharp and filled with anger, cut through the church. "She betrayed me. She's no faithful bride, and she's a liar." Gasps filled the air. Murmurs spread like wildfire. The pastor froze, unsure of what to say. Clara shook her head desperately, her voice trembling. "It isn't true! I swear to you it isn't true!" But no one listened. In Dusty Creek, the word of a man carried more weight than the truth of a woman. And in that single moment, Clara's reputation, her dignity, and her future were torn apart. Thomas turned his back on her. The congregation followed, whispering with contempt. Even her own family lowered their eyes, too ashamed to stand by her side. Shunned, humiliated, abandoned, Clara stumbled out of the church. The townsfolk watched as she walked down the main street in silence, her white dress dragging through the dust, her tears falling freely. Doors closed, neighbors muttered. In a single morning, she had gone from a bride-to-be to an outcast. That night, Clara left Dusty Creek. She carried nothing but a small satchel and her broken heart. The desert stretched endlessly before her. Days burned with heat, nights froze with cruel winds. Coyotes howled in the darkness as she huddled near a dying fire, clutching herself against the cold. Hunger gnawed at her. Fear followed her every step. Yet still she walked, because there was nowhere else to go. At dawn, her strength nearly gone, she heard something. Hoofbeats, voices speaking in a language she did not know. She turned and froze. A group of Apache riders approached. Their leader, a tall warrior named Naya, rode at the front. His eyes, sharp as an eagle's, studied her carefully. Clara trembled. She had heard the stories. Settlers called them savages, kidnappers, killers. She expected the end, but Naya did not raise his weapon. He dismounted slowly, reached for a leather flask and offered her water. Clara hesitated. Then, with shaking hands, she accepted. In that single act, she found more kindness than she had been shown in her own town. The Apaches brought her to their camp. At first there was suspicion. The women eyed her warily, the children stayed close to their mothers. But an elderly woman laid a blanket over Clara's shoulders, gave her food, and whispered words she did not understand, but felt in her heart. Days turned into weeks. Clara began to learn their ways. She gathered wood, ground maize, helped tend to the children. She watched their ceremonies by firelight, the beat of the drums stirring something deep inside her. She learned their language, clumsily at first, then with growing confidence, and slowly Dusty Creek faded from her memory. But Naya, he remained. He watched her with quiet respect. He saw her resilience, her courage, her refusal to break despite all she had endured. He spoke to her by the river, under the moon, sharing stories of his people and listening to hers. Their silences were as deep as their words. What began as curiosity became trust. What grew from trust became something more. Two worlds so different. Two hearts beating in the same rhythm, yet love was never simple. When Naya told the elders he wished to take Clara as his wife, doubts arose. Some feared the anger of the settlers if they discovered a white woman among the tribe. Others questioned if she could truly belong. Clara felt the sting of rejection once more, the same sting she had endured in Dusty Creek. For a moment, she feared she would lose everything again. But Naya stood firm. "She is not an outsider," he told them. "She is one of us. She is my heart." The council deliberated, and at last they agreed. Clara would be accepted. The wedding was set at sunset in the heart of the Apache camp. Clara stood, no longer in her torn white dress, but in garments the women had sewn for her, adorned with beads and feathers. Yet around her wrist, tied like a memory, was a strip of her old bridal veil, a symbol of what she had left behind. The fire blazed as drums beat in the twilight. The people gathered in a circle. Naya took Clara's hand, and together they stood before the elders. A cord was bound around their joined hands, uniting them as one. The people sang, voices rising into the desert air. Tears filled Clara's eyes, not of sorrow but of rebirth. She was no longer the bride rejected by Dusty Creek. She was the wife of Naya, warrior of the Apache. She was no longer an outcast, but part of a family, chosen and loved. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in fire and gold, Clara and Naya sealed their union. Not in silence, not in shame, but in strength, love, and freedom. And so, in the vast wilderness of the Old West, the woman cast aside by her own people discovered a truth she had never known. That sometimes the greatest journey is not across deserts or mountains, but from despair to hope, from rejection to belonging. And that love, true love, knows no boundaries. And here ends this surprising story. Thank you for watching.